Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is good to be together in this weird way of being together on this day after Halloween, this All Souls Day, this eve of the election. I anticipate for many of us, it might be an anxious week. And so I have a little bit of advice to share with you all. First, I encourage you to take care of your body. The mantra that I use for this is I ask myself how I can be 10% more comfortable right now. Sometimes that's taking a drink of water or stretching my back a little or just taking a couple of smooth breaths. So I offer that to you as a tool for this week. I also offer you, if you're someone who likes to watch the returns come in on election night, to set yourself a bedtime in advance, because all of the people that I know whose job it is to predict what's going to happen on Tuesday do not expect a definitive answer that day. And so you don't need to stay up until 3 in the morning. The news will be there for you the next morning. So figure out how you can take care of yourself that evening. We know that this coming election is important, but we also know that it is neither the destruction or the salvation of our country. Things endure, people endure. There will be work to do regardless. So on this All Souls Day, I invite you to remember that your ancestors have survived every pandemic, at least some of them. They have survived every political crisis and time of uncertainty, at least some of them. And you carry that within you. It gives me a little bit of comfort to remember that. I also know, and we all know, that the work of creating the beloved community belongs to all of us. So I invite you this week especially to find ways to keep creating the world that you want to live in, to not let everything hinge on the results of this election. So reach out to the people you love, especially the people who are more vulnerable right now. Partner with others to do the work of justice, and figure out the ways that you can be a person of love, a person of hope, and a person of change now. Regardless of what happens on Tuesday, we need you to be that person. We all need all of us to be that person. So come, let us gather. Come, let us worship.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura McClellan, and I'm from the Sunday Services Committee. I would like to extend a welcome to everyone gathered here this morning, though we are spread afar, whether you're new or a regular at People's Church. To those of you who are visitors to our services or here for the first time, thank you for being with us today. People's Church is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association and part of a tradition of liberal religion. Here, our mission is to be a beloved community embracing and serving our diverse world. Welcome. Welcome all.
Sing to the power of the
I have a few announcements for us this morning, resources to help us in this week, and a few opportunities to connect online. So the first is a group of Unitarian Universalist ministers have gotten together to offer 12 hours straight of a Zoom room focused on spiritual grounding and spiritual practices on Election Day. So from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., you can pop in for as much or as little as you need to be with people who share our faith and our values, and different clergy offering the tools they need or the tools they use to navigate this time. The Zoom links for that are both on our Facebook page and in our church newsletter. And then on Thursday, the Unitarian Universalist Association is offering a vigil and community gathering at 8 p.m. Again, links are in Facebook and on our newsletter. It will feature our Unitarian Universalist Association president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, and others. And then if you need some counter programming for joy, on Friday night, we are having a People's Church Zoom karaoke party at this same link. So I have figured out how to do Zoom karaoke over the past few months, and it is ridiculous and fun. So if that is something that you need, come join us there. And also, I want to let all of you know that my schedule is more open this week than usual. I have cleared some time on purpose. So if you need conversation or support, not in those large group settings, but would like to talk to me, please be in touch. And now our chalice lighting.
And I'm Black Widow, who, mindful that with great power comes great responsibility, we light this chalice in the hopes that in brightest day and in blackest night, our faith will flame on.
There was once an old woman who lived by herself in the village. Rumor had it she could always accurately predict when it was going to rain, or help heal a sick child with herbs, or calm angry neighbors to help them resolve their differences. People came from all over the land to meet with her and seek her advice on matters both large and small. Her reputation was so great that it was said that she was never wrong. Not ever. Now, some of the children in the village could not believe that. So they always asked her questions about everything they could think of, about the planets and animals and science, the whole world. And no matter what they came up with, she always answered correctly. Finally, one girl decided to challenge the old woman. So with a bird hidden in her hands, she came to the woman's house.
Old woman, come show us how wise you really are.
Oh, hello. May I help you?
People say that you know everything, so why don't you prove it?
Now, if I knew everything, that would be pretty impossible. However, I believe you're holding a bird behind your back.
The girl was disappointed. How could she have known that she had a bird behind her back? And thinking quickly, she came up with a new plan and decided to trick the old woman.
So, is this bird behind my back dead or alive?
Now, the woman thought for a bit and realized that if it was alive, the girl would pinch a nerve in her neck and kill the bird. And if she said that it was dead, then of course she would let it fly free. So she pondered for a moment.
Dead or alive? Well, the answer, I know, and I trust the answer completely. The answer is in your hands. It's completely up to you.
The girl realized that the woman really was wise, and she suddenly felt ashamed for trying to trick her. The answer was really in her hands, so she looked apologetically into the bird's eyes before she set it free.
Thank you, Diane, for that story. It is a challenging time to live in the world. And I have had a number of similar conversations with you all, or with some of you, where we say things like, it's hard to go to the store and see people with their masks below their nose and wonder if they believe in science. Or it's hard to have political conversations with my relatives because they have such different views. And sometimes these interactions turn into disrespect and fights and are just hard to live with. And in the church, we do not all agree on everything, that is sure. But we agree to engage our differences and treat each other with respect. And we share similar values like believing the teachings of science. And that really matters right now, when holding our values can sometimes feel isolating. And so this is the moment where I invite you to be the generous people that you are and continue to support the good and important work of the church. The offering will now be received.
Please join in giving thanks for all that sustains us. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love, which none of us can accomplish alone.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in the struggle and the body.
Today's first reading is We Are Called by Derek Jackson. In these times, we are called to step into the mess and murk of life, called to be strong and vulnerable, called to console and to challenge, called to be grounded and to hold lofty ideals, called to love in the face of hate. We are called, and it is not easy, and we will not always agree, and we will yell and scream and cry, and we will laugh and smile and sing. We are called to be together. There is so much work to do, and we cannot do it alone. We need one another, holding each other accountable to our covenants, to the holy, to love and justice. In these times, we are called. The second reading is Prayer Ballot by Luke Stevens Royer. This is written for the presidential election in 2016. I walk in as on pilgrimage. The altar cloths are red, white, and blue. The ushers are the women who have been running these things, who have been running everything since before I was born. I'm handed the ballot like a scroll because the questions seem that important, ancient and modern, of what my God and country ask of me. Who? Who for commissioner, mayor, president? Who for District 8, Ward 7, school board? Who will do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly? I make my mark with at least a shred of hope that something good will come from this. And regardless, I remember, the world won't be destroyed entirely by this. The world won't be saved entirely by this. Marking my vote is like kneeling in prayer, because neither will accomplish anything right away. But the purpose of both is to remind me of my deepest hope for the world that I'm trying to help create. So I rise from my prayer and turn in my ballot and remember the who is me and us and we the people. And again, I set to the task that is mine, justice, mercy, humble service in my small corner of the world.
Our next reading is from an essay in the book, The Witches Are Coming by Lindy West. She writes, in the summer of 2017, some old friends invited me to appear on their podcast. They are two stand-up comedians in their mid-30s, and their show was a kind of micro-focus group, investigating how to be better straight white dudes by picking the brains of guests who don't fit that description. They wanted to know what people like me, for instance, fat, female, feminist, need from people like them, plausible extras in a Buffalo Wild Wings commercial. It was a sweet and, I think, encouraging idea. How to build a better white guy is a conversation that could turn academic fast, replete with all the jargon that the sneering class finds so tedious: intersectionality, emotional labor, systemic oppression, the dreaded privilege. But when I sat down with my friends, only one question sprang to mind. It was personal, not pedantic. Do you ever speak up for me? That question has been quietly nagging at my friendships with men since Grab 'em by the Pussy. The sound of Billy Bush snickering as Donald Trump talked about women in the most dehumanizing terms has been devastating in its ease and in how little it surprised me. I know that my male friends are privy to those kinds of conversations, even if they don't take part in them. I also know that some of them do take part. I've heard secondhand about men I consider close friends complaining that their girlfriends are getting fat. I know that there are men I love who rank women by number. I know that they consider themselves to be good people who fundamentally care about women's safety and equality. So if you care, how often do you say something? Maybe you'll confront your close friends, but what about more powerful men, famous men, cool men, men who could further your career? Do you ever stick up for me sounds childish. But I don't know that gussing up the sentiment in more sophisticated language would enhance its meaning. It isn't fun to be the one who sticks up. Our society has engineered robust consequences for squeaky wheels, a verdant pantheon from eye rolls all the way up to physical violence. One of the subtlest and most pervasive is social ostracism, coding empathy as the fun killer. Consideration of others as embarrassing weakness, and dissenting voices as out of touch, bleeding heart dweebs at best. Coolness is a fierce disciplinarian. The result is that, for the most part, the only people weathering the consequences are the ones who don't have the luxury of staying quiet. Women, already impeded and imperiled by sexism, also have to carry the social stigma of being feminist buzzkills if they call attention to it. People of color not only have to deal with racism, they also have to deal with white people labeling them angry or hostile or difficult for objecting. What we could really use is some loud, unequivocal backup. And not just in public, when the tide of opinion has already started to turn and a little wokeness might benefit you, but in private, when it can hurt. One of my podcasting friends told me that he does stick up for women in challenging situations, like testosterone-soaked comedy green rooms, for instance, but complained, "I get mocked for it." Yes, I know you do. Welcome. Getting yelled at and made fun of is where many of us live all the time. Speaking up costs us friends, jobs, credibility, and invisible opportunities we'll never even know enough about to regret. I know there's pressure not to be a dorky, try-hard male feminist stereotype. There's always a looming implication that you could lose your spot in the boys' club. If you seem opportunistic or performative in your support, if you suck up too much oxygen and demand praise, women will yell at you for that too. But I need you to absorb that risk. I need you to get yelled at and made fun of a lot. And if you get kicked out of the club, I need you to be relieved, and I need you to help build a new one.
Earth was given as a garden cradle for humanity, tree of life and tree of knowledge, place for our
Before you all called me to Kalamazoo 5.5 years ago, I served a church that was a founding member of a new congregation-based community organizing effort. It was a cousin of our own Isaac. And I offered a prayer at our first public meeting with elected officials. Candidates for mayor and city council were there to listen to our platform. And if they agreed with us, they would get 3 minutes to address the hundreds of people gathered that day in the enormous sanctuary of a Baptist church. At the rehearsal, other people who had speaking parts and I practiced our places and our timings with a community organizer in from out of town to teach us how to do a public meeting. He kept calling me Reverend Lonberg, which was too formal for me. It's fine if you call me Rachel, I told him. Rachel, he said, I will call you that now, but I will not call you that at the meeting. At the meeting, you will be Reverend Lonberg. I'm not giving away any of your power. We need to use every tool we have to make them hear us. His words have been echoing in my head ever since. I'm not giving away any of your power. We need every tool we have to make them hear us. So I'm inviting you on this election eve to think about power as we decide who we will give power to, although I assume many of us have already filled out our ballots. It's important to think about what power means and how each of us has power and how we use it. There's sometimes a naivete about power in Unitarian, Universalist, and other liberal religious circles in which I travel. We can think that because we want everyone to be equal, we should act as though that is already true in every setting. I do this too. While all people have the same inherent worth, we all have different amounts of power in the various circles in which we live our lives. While we should be equal in church, our habits can sometimes fail us when we are in the public sphere, in a context where we don't all know each other, when we don't all have covenants that bind us together, and when we don't claim the power that we possess, which could be credentials or expertise or something else, we give away some of our power, which makes us less effective in creating the world we want. We need to live in the world as it is and use every tool we have to make the world we yearn for. This is what I've been thinking about recently. And today's sermon is just as much for me as it is for any of you, because I struggle with this tension. How do I claim my power and separateness and practice equity and equality all at once? Some of you have been my teachers in this. I believe to create the beloved community on a larger scale, beyond relationships, beyond the people we know, we need to be clear-eyed about power, where we have it, where we don't, how we can get more of it, and how we can use it to create more and love and justice in the world. How we use it to challenge the systems of oppression, to tear down the bad clubs and create new ones, and to use the gentle, coercive force of well-organized people to shift politics and policies and practices. I don't want any of you to start calling me the Reverend Rachel Lonberg. Unitarian Universalist theologies of ministry don't see ministers as a particular set apart category of humans. And in the context of relationship, covenant, and community, when we are united by our bond of union, we can live into the world of all people having equal value, a world where power and credentials does not determine worth. But as we step beyond our small circle, as we attempt to make our values real in the world, I remember what that community organizer taught me. And that's when I become the Reverend Rachel Lonberg. When I talk to city and county leaders, when I speak to issues of public concern, I use every tool I possess to help people hear me, take me seriously, and trust my moral judgment. The title matters, and it is one of the tools I can use to help people hear me and hear the people I hope to represent, the people that I'm in relationship with, the people who ask me to speak up. We need to use every tool we have to make ourselves heard. So this has been a lot about me and how I think about and deploy my power, the power of the ministry that you all have entrusted me with. And I offered this reflection, this wrestling, as an invitation. How do you wield power and influence? How do you use every tool you have to create the beloved community, the reign of love and justice in our world? So I offer another story, a story about the work of building power. And this is from the book, Politics is for Power by Eitan Hirsch, which I commend to all of you if you want to get more deeply into this thinking. Angela Aldis is a mother of 2 young children who works as a nurse and who lives with multiple sclerosis. At the time of President Trump's inauguration, she had recently moved to rural Pennsylvania, a conservative community where she didn't know very many people. And on that inauguration day, she looked at her 2 daughters and felt that she needed to find a way to do something. She thought, I'm so lucky. I have this bad disease, but I have the medicine I need. I have privileges, so I have an obligation. This is a time in history people are going to read about in history books. My kids are going to read about it. We don't want to look back at the end of our lives and say we did nothing. So on that day, inauguration day, she started a journal. Her plan was for 1,461 days, the entirety of a presidential term, she would do and then write down one thing she did to make a difference. She started small. After long days of work and caring for her kids, she would leave voicemail messages for her congressman at 10:30 at night. Angela Aldis did not know very many people in her community. She didn't know where to find the people who shared her values, who could be her partners and guides in the work she wanted to do. And then one day, she saw a small protest against the Muslim travel ban outside the county courthouse as she was driving past. There were 5 people there holding signs, and she was overcome with emotion. She stopped and thanked them and offered to buy them all coffee to warm them up. Introductions were made, contact information was shared, and a new group was formed to support progressive causes and candidates in their conservative county. It began with 6 people sitting around a kitchen table: an empty nester stay-at-home mom, a retired Catholic school teacher, a former lawyer in her 50s who was heading back to school for nursing, another attorney in his 50s, a recent college graduate, and Angela. This group started small, obviously, and took a long view of change. They had no illusions about transforming their community overnight. They knew that if they were engaging in electoral work, they would lose elections over and over and over again, but they were in it for the long haul. So they started learning how to organize, how to hold a good meeting, how to knock on doors, how to have meaningful conversations with people who disagreed with them. They called themselves Voices of Westmoreland, named for their county, VOW for short. A fitting name as they were making a promise to do this work together for a long time. They spent a lot of time thinking about what conversations would work best in their community, where they might find common ground with people who disagreed with them about many things. And they thought that they could have these good, rich conversations about gerrymandering, healthcare, and the environment. The people in their community whatever their political identity, cared about those things. They did hold a few more small protests, mainly as a recruiting tool. They felt that standing on the street with signs wouldn't change policy, but it did help them find more people like Angela. So after a couple of months, they had 12 people at their meetings, and they had networked with like-minded groups in Pittsburgh, which wasn't too far away. The group was getting to know one another, learning each other's stories, and what motivated them to be giving their time to this effort. Angela spoke about having MS and how the medicine she took cost $7,000 a month, about how she would go bankrupt if she ever lost her health insurance. And then an opportunity appeared. A few months into their efforts, the Republican congressman for their area resigned and a special election was called. Val realized they supported where the Democratic candidate stood on healthcare and the environment, and they became one of the lead organizers in support of his campaign. They recruited other volunteers, and the people who joined them were mostly Democrats, but also anti-Trump Republicans and independents and socialists. Anyone who wanted to be there was invited. And everyone was trained to tell their stories to strangers, the strangers that they met as they walked door to door in their community, to talk about the issues with empathy and understanding for people who disagreed with them. The best door-to-door canvasser of that effort was an 11-year-old girl who was passionate about helping senior citizens. She would say to people who were surprised and delighted by this child on their doorstep, "How crazy would it be if seniors couldn't afford insulin and the stuff they need? That's not right." People listened. Members and volunteers talked to thousands of their neighbors. And if you pay close attention to the news, perhaps you remember that the Democratic candidate, Connor Lamb, won by 755 votes in a special election in February 2018. I remember that headline, but I didn't know some of the story behind it. And while this felt like a victory, the people of VOW knew they weren't done. There were still conversations to have and coalitions to build. They remained committed for the long haul. A year ago, they realized that to build more power, they needed a staff person. So over 200 people became dues-paying members who employ a community organizer. And just as important, through their work together, VOW has become a community. For the retirees and the young families, VOW became a primary social scene. People call the kids of the lead volunteers the VOW cousins. And people in the group take care of their growing community of friends and neighbors. Angela has driven undocumented immigrants who are scared to drive to medical appointments. The group has helped members avoid evictions, and they chip in for gas cards and diapers and other necessities for each other. In this group, individuals who we wouldn't think have a lot of power alone, a mother with 2 kids and a serious disease, a few people who are there because they have no health insurance, a Muslim family facing discrimination, teachers who need more school supplies, an 11-year-old girl are powerful together. Together, they have the power to change their community, both through electoral politics and through building connections that overcome eviction and loneliness and scarcity, to bring the wider world and their small circles both closer to being a beloved community. The main idea of Eitan Hirsch's Politics is for Power, the book that includes the story of Voices of Westmoreland that I just told, is that most professional class white people are doing politics wrong. We, and I want to be really careful with this we, because I am among the people the author directs his arguments to, and I know not everyone on our call in our church is in that category. So it's a very specific we, and you can decide if you're in the we or not. we treat politics like it's a long-running soap opera, paying close attention to the twists and turns of our national political saga, while rooting for our heroes and against our villains, and not doing a whole lot except observing and talking about it. This doesn't serve anyone. If we want to make real change, we turn off the news and start talking to our neighbors and our local elected leaders. We'd focus less on the national political saga, but more on smaller scale efforts like city and county level elections and policies, because we can have real and significant influence there. I know this isn't news to some of you, especially those of you who are engaged deeply in the work of Isaac, our congregation-based community organizing group. Isaac just had its public meeting focused on just the kinds of issues Hirsch tells his readers to give attention. Housing policies enacted by the cities, townships, and villages in our county. Better training for our elected leaders and law enforcement officials about racism and anti-racism. It's not as thrilling as the national soap opera, and it's much harder to pay attention to because of the state of local news. But it's an area where we can build power and have influence and make real change. Since I finished the Politics is for Power book a few weeks ago, now every time I tune into the national politics, I think to myself, am I following this as a soap opera? Am I listening to this like a sports fan rooting for my favorite team? How do I stop being a spectator in this story? It's uncomfortable to sit with those questions when I'm, doing the dishes at the end of the day, catching up on the news. But I'm also finding it really compelling. So if you're someone who spends a lot of time with the news, I invite you into this discomfort. On this election eve, I encourage you to think about the power that you have already in the voting booth, but also in your family, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your relationships, in hobbies or professional associations or wherever it may be. How can you use it for good? This might mean speaking up for the people not in the room, as Lindy West asked of her friends in today's reading. This might mean figuring out policies and laws and ordinances where you are, and asking how might they be brought closer to the beloved community. In the work of anti-racism, doing this work of using your power for good is sometimes called spending your privilege. There's a great little book that has a passage about this that I find compelling. The book is called This Book is Anti-Racist. It's mostly for teens, but I think it's good for anyone. And in it, the author Tiffany Jewell writes, "My adjacency to the dominant culture is my power in undoing it. And I can use this to keep the doors that have been opened for me wide open for those who are on the margins. You can do this too, especially if you are a person in the dominant culture." Black feminist and racial justice advocate Brittany Packett tells us to spend your privilege. To spend your privilege is to use your power to change perceived normality. Using social media to spread awareness about underrepresented issues is a fine start, but as soon as you think you've spent enough privilege, that's the time that it's time to spend some more, Packett writes. If you are a cis male, use your voice to support and amplify trans folks and women and their many identities. If you are a person who has economic stability, use your position to redistribute resources and amplify those who are living in poverty. If you are white, spend your privilege by sharing voices of folks of the global majority, by stepping aside and giving them the space to lead, and by actually listening. So spend your privilege in service of our values, because the trick of using power well is to maintain awareness of how it is working and be in relationship with the people you want to share it with. When I put on my full credentials and step into the identity of the Reverend Rachel Lonberg of People's Church of Kalamazoo, I do it because someone asked me to. And most often it is the leadership of Isaac. What relationships do you have that help you make sure you are using your power well? I also invite you to think about the power you don't yet have. How do you build more influence? How do you get more tools to make people hear you and to help you make change? How do you join with others to accomplish together that which none of us can accomplish alone? Obviously, Isaac is one way to do that in Kalamazoo County. And while Angela Aldis and her neighbors created a new organization in their community, I encourage you to look at the small organizations you already have access to and ask how they might be part of the effort to make your values more real, to make a world that is more just. Looking at what already exists feels especially important now as we all try to manage this pandemic. It's really hard to start a new thing if you can't all sit around the kitchen table together. So perhaps you're going to ask, how does the parent-teacher organization at your child's school prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable kids? Does your neighborhood association or homeowners association reflect your values? Are there parts of People's Church in need of transformation? Can you show up to meetings, notice current practices, build relationships, listen to others, and build coalitions and speak up for your values? How I wish that the beloved community could be realized all at once. We know that it can't. We know that the world won't be entirely destroyed or entirely saved by what happens on Tuesday, and as votes are tallied in the days following. Small pieces will be saved, perhaps, by us and by so many others who step into the mess and the murk, who love in the face of hate, who do the next small thing for love, over and over and over again. So may it be so. May we make it so. And amen.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands,
I sing that song to my children as a lullaby. And I love ending with love will guide us through the hard night, as night literally falls. But we also know that in these days, which I can't even anticipate what they will feel like this week for each of us, we have each other, we have our values, we have our communities and our commitments, and the love that is greater than any of us to guide us. So may it be so as we return to this snowy world. Go in peace and go in love.